Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Caroline Colas, and I'm the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan, and your host today on the Positive Psychology Hour, a series that we do in partnership with Whole Being Institute. It's curated by Phoebe Atkinson. Today, we're going to be talking about beating burnout with character strengths with Ruth Pearce. Ruth, it's the third time that you've been on our Positive Psychology Hour. We welcome you back to talk about burnout because it's being talked a lot about these days, and it's probably more prevalent than we realize. She has been interviewing project managers who report that burnout is something that they almost expect in this VULCA. That's an interesting acronym. It stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity world, this VULCA world. In this session today, Ruth is going to explore how to use our character strengths from the VIA Character Strength Institute to prevent and reverse burnout. She'll tell us a little bit more about what she does for VIA. She is a JD, PMP, CTCT, ACC, CIC. I don't even know what all of those mean, Ruth, but other than you're really brilliant and smart and fun to be with. She runs In It Together group coaching as part of a Lever Long Enough project motivator and supporting coaches and managers and team members to transform workplaces into communities. And here at the JCC, that is what we're all about. How do we create community? And how do we create the world that we want to live in together? Ruth sees character strengths as a powerful way to forge connections between team members. Her book, Be a Project Motivator, Unlock the Secrets of Strength-Based Project Management, based on 20 years of direct experience in the field and extensive research, was published in 2018. So, welcome to the call, Ruth. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. It's really great to be here. And I have to trim that bio because if you want to find out who I am, you can go to LinkedIn and find out. We don't need the sort of history of Ruth from day one. So I apologize for that. It makes me cringe to listen to my own bio. So I will do something about that for the future. Sorry, I am sitting on my couch. So I'm just going to adjust myself. So we're here today talking about burnout. As always, I like to make these things as interactive as possible. I can absolutely talk nonstop for an hour without pausing for breath virtually, but I don't think that is the way that we get to, learn as much as possible and get insights and perspective. So I really encourage you to put things in the chat, and maybe Caroline, can I ask you to keep an eye on the chat because it's hard for me to keep an eye on everything all at once?
Sure, absolutely.
And if people can unmute themselves and they want to throw in a comment, please go ahead. I am not a speaker who gets upset by being interrupted. So I know some speakers, they like to keep questions to the end and all of that kind of stuff. Nope, if it comes up, bring it up, because you will not be the only person wondering about something, and it's timely. When it comes to mind, that's the time for us to bring it forward. So please join in. If I don't get past slide 1, that's okay, because it's not about me sharing my slides, it's about having a fruitful conversation. So I have, as Caroline said, I've been doing some work on burnout because the reason I transferred, for 25 years, I was a project manager. And in 2016, I quit my job. And I quit my job suddenly and said, that's it, I'm out of here, I'm gone, because I was burned out. Using the words project manager or project management would make me feel queasy almost. Everything was tiring, everything was a drain. I just couldn't do it. And so I left, and I have not gone back to project management. I've done a little bit here and there, but essentially I stopped being a full-time project manager in 2016 and went into all sorts of other things, positive psychology, thanks to the Whole Being Institute, coaching. I'm passionate about group coaching. And I woke up early this year and I went, burnout is what started this journey. And I'm seeing burnout left and right, particularly in project managers. So that's where my focus is going to be. And I've been interviewing project managers, and some of the stories I hear about their experiences of burnout are really quite distressing. And I have a couple of examples I'll share in a moment. But before we do that, I just wanted to do the check-in. Some of you will have seen that this is how I start and end all my presentations or all my discussions, is to give you a moment to think about how you're feeling right now. You were doing something right before this session, and now you're in this session coming to listen to me blather on, and just take a moment and see, how are you feeling? It might be, you might be feeling a mixture of emotions. You're probably feeling more than one emotion. If you want to share, you can use that code, go to menti.com and use the 95736440. We're just going to take a quiet moment and check in with ourselves as to how we feel.
I don't know what a lot of these words mean.
Well, so unfortunately, it's in, or fortunately, depending on who you are, Spanish.
Oh,
Doesn't matter. Just think about, how are you feeling right now? Are you feeling excited? Have you got a sense of anticipation? Are you stressed? Are you tired? Are you distracted? What's going on? What comes to mind for you? And you know, it doesn't have to be any of the words on this thing. And I apologize for it being in Spanish.
So you want an answer?
Sure. If you feel inclined to give an answer, feel free to share. Or you can put it into Menti, or you can put it in the chat, whatever suits you. We've got some stressed and defeated and unsettled.
Okay.
Deirdre's tranquilo. That's great. Overwhelmed. Yeah, isn't there a lot of that at the moment? Distracted, overwhelmed, scattered, anxious. Anticipation regarding security at our local synagogue. Annoyed from a prior call. This is something that happens to us a lot, is that we carry emotions over from one experience to another. So you came in early this morning, you've had an annoying call, so you're feeling tired and drained. And here you are in this session, hoping that it's going to engage you and keep you focused. So thank you all for sharing this. Yeah, discouraged from dealing with an airline. There's just so much at the moment that just is sort of very energy draining. So with that in mind, I want to ask you, what do you think of when we use the word burnout? Depleted, reaching my limit, can't go on, too exhausted. Yeah, too many tasks, can't seem to get on top of anything, unable to focus. So this, if you Google burnout or basically go to a thesaurus and look up burnout, these are the words that people share. These are other words that people use in place of burnout: ineffectiveness and stagnation and tiredness and disinclination, and you've hit a wall and you're exhausted, lack of energy and enthusiasm, just a general feeling. And there's more and more of that around at the moment, because people have been put in positions where there's less and less sort of choice and control over what's going on. So one of the most significant researchers into burnout is Christine Maslach. She's actually conceived of this sort of multi-step process, if you like, that you go through that takes you into burnout. And it starts with workload, whatever workload may look like to you. So it could be workload in the office, it could be workload in your, the things you have to get done, the list of tasks. Everybody, a few people mentioned that it's having too many tasks and feeling like you can't get them done. So that is workload, the things that we have to get done. And we feel that we don't have control over what's going to get done, when it's going to get done. And of course, in COVID, we've had more control problems because we can't control what other people do. We can't control if maybe we get exposed to COVID. We can't control how we handle COVID or make choices about things or what we can and can't do. The interest and the model on the right-hand side is actually from Freudenberger. He's the person who coined the phrase burnout. And he had this 12-step process for creating burnout that started with having to prove yourself and working harder. You know, I can do this, I'm going to be able to do this, I'll show everybody. And you work harder and harder and harder until basically you've got nothing left. Both of these models for me have a little bit of a challenge because they imply that there's a step-by-step process. They imply that it starts with workload and then you feel a lack of control, or you start with this compulsion to prove yourself in the workplace. You start working harder. The next thing is that you neglect your own needs. And what actually happens is, anyone has ever seen that diagram that is the process for grieving? It's supposed to be 5 or 7 steps, depending on what model you look at. And it looks as though you follow this stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, you're at the pit, you know, and then you work up the other side. When in actual fact, if you've ever seen that diagram that someone used, you know, my journey through grief, it's all over the place. It goes back from, you know, step 1 to step 12 to step 9 to step 2 to step 1. And my feedback from people about burnout is it's the same thing, that we may go from working harder to adjusting our values because we just can't stand by all our principles anymore because it is just so hard to keep on top of everything. And then maybe we start to feel depressed because we're not really being true to ourselves in that. And then, you know, but we feel like we need to prove ourselves and we need to demonstrate to people that we are who we say we are. And so it's not necessarily 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and so on. It's all over the place. And this can cause confusion about what's going on for us. It can also leave us not sure how far into a journey of burnout we are. Are we just at the beginning where a few tweaks and adjustments will make things better? Or are we deep into it and it's going to be like, you know, digging your way out of a deep hole? So some interesting developments we've had recently are that the definition that originally came out, as I said, from Freudenberger in 1974, was that he described burnout as the extinction of motivation or incentive. And very often it is related to not feeling like you're accomplishing what you set out to do. You're not achieving the desired results. And so it feels futile and fruitless and pointless. And so those things together are, you know, actually start to sap our willingness to keep trying. In 2019, the World Health Organization actually added burnout to their International Code of Diagnostics, whatever that stands for. And they describe it as a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. They also say that it is specific to the workplace, that it is a workplace phenomenon. And I see Sheila is shaking her head. I am 100% with you there, Sheila, because it's everything. And we're hearing more people talk about symptoms that sound like burnout because of things that aren't necessarily to do with the workplace. It's a yes and. So, you know, maybe your lifestyle has changed, where you work has changed, who's home when you're working, being able to go out, not go out, whatever it is, it's all of these things in total. And then what happens is it's the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? If it's a workplace phenomenon, then what you seem to be able to do 6 months ago or a year ago, suddenly it seems overwhelming. And you're like, this is the next thing. We have shame and self-criticism because we say, what's wrong with me? I was doing this before, why can't I do it now? I was able to handle this in the past. What's wrong with me that I can't do that now? And back in 2020, when we started our In It Together coaching, we worked with project managers who'd made that transition sort of really between Friday and Monday, from being wherever they regularly worked to being at home. And I remember one lady said, I don't know what my problem is. I feel tired, I'm exhausted. I don't get it because nothing has changed for me. And one of our coaches said, well, what's the same? And she started to go through things and she was like, well, that isn't really the same because we've now got 5 people in the house all day long. She had always worked from home, or for 10 years, she'd been working from home. She always worked in the kitchen. She would set herself up on the kitchen table when everyone else left for school and work. And she would work solidly all day until people came home. She would prepare dinner. She did not prepare breakfast. She did not prepare lunch. Everyone was out of the house for lunchtime. Her kids were in their teens. Her husband worked outside the home. Suddenly, everyone was home all the time. Everyone was trying to do things on the internet. It turned out they had 3 devices and 5 people. So not everyone can be on the internet at the same time. The broadband wasn't broad enough for all of them to be online at the same time. Her husband became obsessed with CNN News and had the television on all day in the background with the news saying, you know, here are the numbers, here's the latest, this is what's happening, this is what's happening. And she said, whereas she always worked in complete silence when she worked at home before, it turned out the only thing that had not changed was that she still works from home. And that realization that her life had been turned upside down and inside out, and she had sort of not given herself credit, was huge. She said it was a huge release for her because for 2 weeks, she'd been saying to herself, what is wrong with me? I was doing this before, you know, I was working from home before. Why is it suddenly so stressful? It should be easy for me. It should be. So there's a lot of judgment about who we should be and how we should be and how we should be behaving. So I see there's a few things in the chat. Believe me, the housewives pre-Women's Lib had plenty of burnout. It's very, very true. And housewives still do, because a lot of people are housewives and, right? They're keeping the home. My husband expects me when he's having a really stressful time at work to, you know, bring him something to eat at lunchtime, and because he is working from home. And I try to do that because he does have a very stressful job. It doesn't always work the other way, though. When my stuff is stressful and he's having a quieter time, I don't automatically get lunch brought to me because there's still that perception of, you know, this is what women do, right? If our kids call with a problem, it's talk to mum. And I'll be the one that hears whatever the unloading is of whatever problem. So we, you know, we may take on these roles or have expectations that we will do things as well as everything else. When life turned on its head for COVID, it was very often the women in the household, or the, you know, the women in the household were often the ones who had to figure out, how do you get grocery shopping done when can only go at certain times of day because of restrictions about who can come into the stores? How do you get grocery shopping done when now you need 4 times as much because everyone's at home all the time? How do you budget for all of these things? It fell differently on different people. So that's the gloomy. I just want to check in with you, and I'd already seen a lot of nodding. So I just want to check in with you. How many of you have either experienced burnout yourself or you've seen someone else go through it? Lots of hands, yes. And one of the things I do say, and thank you for the people who are going into Menti, one of the things I do say is COVID, I do not believe, burned me out. So one of the challenges that we have is, again, like we like these linear, you know, or circular models of things. We like linear models of things. This goes to here, this goes to here, this goes to here. We like, excuse me, to be able to say that one size fits all, you know. So I hear it a lot at the moment. Well, everybody is stressed by fill in the blank. The things that are stressing a great number of people do not stress me. I could be inside my house and never speak to another person and it wouldn't bother me in the slightest. I don't particularly feel a yearning for in-person meetings and things like that. I will confess that I've been a lifelong germaphobe. So not having to be in public places and not having to make an excuse. You know, now I don't have to say to anyone, yeah, thanks ever so much for that invitation. But I'm not going to come, and then feel a pressure to say because and have a story as to why I can't come. Now I just say, in these COVID times, I don't feel comfortable being in a crowded space, which is actually the same answer I always had. You know, I always felt uncomfortable being in a crowded space, but now it's legit to say that. So everybody reacted a different way. I've spoken to a lot of people who have suffered anxiety in their life, and they actually felt like COVID was what they had prepared for, because we've been anxious and anticipating the worst and worrying about things all the time, even though it didn't make sense. And suddenly it did make sense. You know, you did need to worry about putting your mask on. You did need to worry about what you do before you open the door. You know, that suddenly these habits that some of us already had made sense, and they didn't necessarily make sense before. So Laurie says, COVID didn't burn me out until I got it last week. Dealing with the airlines for months is doing it more so. Yes, so I'm completely with you. I got COVID last August after being vaccinated. My daughter used to say to me, hey, it's just like a bad case of the flu. Don't worry about it. I wanted to kill her when I got it because it was not anything like a bad case of the flu. The only thing that saved her was that I couldn't lift my head off the pillow to go and kill her. I mean, it was exhausting to me to just lie on my side and look at the paint on the wall in the spare room. And I would notice these little imperfections in the paintwork, and they would really bother me. So I would roll over onto my other side, and the spare room was actually a room full of boxes at the time because we had recently moved. And so then the boxes would be saying to me, you really need to unpack me. How long are we just going to sit here? It was miserable. That was COVID. So it's okay, Laurie. I'm actually strangely grateful for the experience. You haven't had to go to bed. Good for you. But do if you need to, because it bites you if you don't take enough rest. So I'm actually grateful for the experience because I don't think there's anything like I've recovered now. It did take a few months to completely recover, but I think there's nothing like actually knowing what something feels like. You know, we can't speak about what an experience is like until we have it. And of course, my experience is my experience. It's not the same for everybody. So if you're burning out, what's the most obvious sign that people can spot in you? Irritability. Yeah. Short temper. Yeah, Abby, it's absolutely true. The solitude, not having the hassles of commuting. I stopped having to fly anywhere. I don't like flying. So I'm sure that will change. Exhaustion, distraction. Yeah. Poor concentration. Everything makes you cry. Oh, isn't that just the truth? It's like even things that you can't even understand why they would make you cry. Short temper. Yeah. Avoiding people. I definitely avoid people when I'm starting to feel that burnout. Sometimes we're confused, foggy, that feeling of nothing quite clicks. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So what can we do? We've had all the doom and gloom. I was at a presentation last week where the person before me presented on peak performance. And I followed up with a presentation on burnout. And did I ever feel like the wet blanket in the room? Because this other person had been going on about, you know, how you can quadruple your productivity and all of this kind of stuff. And I came in and said, you know, is anyone feeling kind of burned out at the moment? And of course, all the hands went up. So overthinking instead of acting on things. Yeah, sort of going around and round in circles and not being able to sort of actually take a step and make a decision to do something. So what can we do? Well, some of you have been in sessions before where we've talked about character strengths. So I just want to remind people that I work with the VIA character strengths. I'm actually now the facilitator and ambassador to VIA rather than I'm not working with them even part-time anymore in the capacity I was in, but I'm out in the world communicating with people about VIA character strengths. And what we know about them is, you know, they're science-based, they're research, they're evidence-based. There's over 800 studies in different domains that show that engaging our character strengths is beneficial. They're universal, so it doesn't matter where you're from or what your religion is or what language you speak or what your cultural upbringing was. We all recognize these same basic 24 character strengths. Somebody wrote to me yesterday and said he thinks he's found the 25th one. I think we're going to have to do a little bit more research on that. But yes, so there are 24 universal character strengths. We know they're stable. So if you were to take your survey, you know, this year and then take it again in a year's time, most of the results are going to stay pretty much in the same place. You know, your lowest strengths are probably still going to be your lowest strengths. Your highest strengths, they may change sequence, but they'll still be your highest strengths, and the middle ones move around a bit. And we know they can change. And I'm looking forward to the research coming out from this COVID time, because I think we're going to find that people have engaged more self-regulation and more prudence, and to some people have engaged more humility, not everybody, during this time, because they've had to think more about other people. And as I've already mentioned, they're evidence-based. So we're not just making this up, they're peer-reviewed as well, which is very important to me, that, you know, other people have taken a look at the results and said, yeah, we get the same results when we do the same studies. We also know that we all have all of them. Definitely more prudence and self-regulation for me, which I needed. Yeah, I've been using way more prudence and self-regulation, which is completely exhausting. So well, hopefully I'm flexing that muscle a bit more easily now. All 24 matter. So it doesn't matter if you're self-regulation. In my case, self-regulation is number 24. It makes it hard for me to resist that second glass of wine after I've had the first one. But, you know, it's still there. I can resist and I can use my self-regulation, and I have been using it all through COVID. And we know that they come in sort of different doses. I've got different sizes here, but I think it's almost different concentrations. So your signature strengths are those ones at the top of your profile that just, you wouldn't be you if they went away. You know, you would not feel like yourself. The middle ones are the ones that we can certainly call on them, but they take a little more concentration, a little more work. You know, if we're thinking about thinking styles, we're more in that sort of conscious effort approach rather than it being on autopilot. And then our lesser strengths can be quite tiring to use. Again, they're available. We can use them. We can use a teaspoon of them when we need them, but there's sometimes a bit more of a reach. And if we have to use those strengths in the lesser area for long periods of time, we can get some exhaustion from that. And I think that's something that we've seen during this COVID. This is where I want to see the research come out, is I think a lot of us have had to engage our lower strengths for a protracted period of time. And that is quite tiring, because that's not, I mean, if you imagine someone who's high in zest, which is not that common, but if you've got someone who's high in zest, who now has to engage their self-regulation that is number 23 or 24 in order to temper their inclination to sort of rush out into the world and embrace people and all of that kind of stuff, it's tiring, because you're having to shut down that top strength a little bit, dial it back, and then dial up this strength that, you know, is not the one that comes most easily to you. So it gets pretty tiring, I believe. We need to see research to confirm that. So when it comes to burnout, what we find is we can come back to our happiness strengths. And I think we've mentioned this in a previous meeting, is that there are 5 character strengths that when we focus on those and we cultivate them, they really help us to increase our sense of life satisfaction. I personally am not a big fan of using the word happiness. I think it conjures up things that are not necessarily positive for us in terms of, you know, what we were aiming to achieve. But life satisfaction, I think, and when you think about that, it's the antithesis of burnout. You know, burnout is the sense of being dissatisfied and disengaged and de-energized across the board. And life satisfaction is that feeling that you're a part of life and you're active and you're engaged in it. And so what we know is that there are 5 particular strengths. All of them can help, but there are 5 particular strengths that really boost that sense of life satisfaction. And so I'm focusing a lot of attention at the moment on talking to project managers about engaging these strengths and figuring out ways to really actively, in small doses. During burnout, we don't want to be asking people, you know, to take on the equivalent of a marathon. We want them to walk to the corner of the street to start with. So doing small things to engage zest. So what is zest? It's enthusiasm and excitement of feeling alive. Okay, that's a tall order for anyone who's feeling burned out, right? But we want people to look for something, one small thing that increases their sense of enthusiasm by 1%. Again, we don't need to aim for happiness. We're aiming for a move towards feeling better. So what is something that engages your enthusiasm, gets you excited just a little bit? And how can you cultivate more of that? So I'd love to know from people, when are you your most excited? and enthusiastic. In nature, lots of science that shows that when we get out into nature, it is really good for mood. Learning something new. Someone told me today that she is learning to read tarot cards, not because she particularly believes in the concept of tarot, but just because she wanted to learn something new. And it doesn't matter if she gets it or she doesn't get it. Planning a vacation. Somebody said dancing, and Joanna said dancing as well. Yeah, turn on some music. Now, a big sign for me, I asked you before about a sign of burnout, is when I don't enjoy music anymore. When my appreciation for music, and I love all kinds of music, is like, I can't be bothered, I don't want that on, and that's just a racket in the background. Big sign that burnout is imminent, because I just don't have the energy for it. Traveling anywhere, see, and that's the opposite for me. Tell me to travel somewhere and, I'm going to feel overwhelmed. Walking with your camera. Yeah, a colleague of mine who's a coach, she does this picture coaching where the person goes out and takes a picture every day and then sort of creates a story around what that picture means to them. When I Zoom with my grandkids, yes, connecting, or going to the theatre and movies, going to the theatre or Broadway, when I feel I've achieved something that is meaningful to me. Yeah, so all of these things are energizing. Remember these things for yourself. Make a note of these things that you're highlighting now that make you feel a little bit more energized. Because if you are feeling down and low and burned out, just a little bit of one of these will help you feel just a little bit better. And that's how it starts, is you feel a little bit better. So that was zest. What's the next one? So the next one is hope and optimism. Pretty sure I've talked about this before at a previous session, but hope is not crossing your fingers and saying, I'm sure tomorrow will be better than today. That is not hope. It is a combination of a positive outlook towards the future and taking specific steps to get there. So again, it's that incremental journey of what do you visualize? And it doesn't have to be something big. Your hope can be, I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to enjoy my shower. Maybe it just, a friend of mine who was describing burnout, he described standing in the shower for an hour, watching the water go down the drain. And he said, now he looks back and he feels guilty because he wasted so much water. Again, more shame. But, that he just stood there. And he said the feeling of the water flowing over his skin actually made him feel better. So, maybe that's it. So tomorrow you're going to have a nice hot shower and it's going to feel good. What are your plans to do that? You're going to set the alarm to make sure that you get up with enough time that you can really revel in it. You're going to turn on the shower a couple of minutes or a few minutes before you get in, so it's really got to the perfect temperature. You're going to find yourself the biggest, fluffiest towel you can, so that when the shower is over, you're wrapping yourself, and it's just the best one you have. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, just the towel that you like the most. And to be able to visualize that and plan those steps that are going to make it more likely to happen. That is hope. And we know from research that people who have that sort of ability to see things as they can make a change, they can do something, they can do some incremental thing to make their life more manageable. That optimism that they have, that hopefulness that they have, tends to make them calmer in the face of difficulty and challenge. People who are more pessimistic, they see everything's happening to them. It's all coming from the outside. So if things are good, it's because the world is treating me right. If things are bad, it's because the world is treating me wrong. And that is taking away that agency. That second piece is that agency. So we want that, a visualization of something small and a plan of 1 or 2 steps that are going to make it more likely to happen. So I'm going to invite you here you hope to clear your mind to enjoy reading again. Okay, so Patrice, I'm going to challenge you to clear your mind and enjoy reading for 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes. Find something, could be something that you've read before and you really enjoyed it. Maybe it's a favorite poem or a passage in a book, or it's a newspaper article about a topic that you're interested in, or maybe it's some topic that you've never read about before, or whatever. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be War and Peace. It doesn't have to be, an end-to-end book review. Just read for a couple of minutes and enjoy it. That's it. Writing handwritten letters and sending cards. Burnout can lead to depression. I've just noticed that question. So burnout in its extreme, and most of the studies around burnout have been done around the medical profession and teachers. Those are the areas where a lot of research has been done. And during COVID, burnout, depression, reports of burnout and depression in medical personnel obviously went up. I don't think anyone would be surprised by that. But it did progress from people would start by reporting burnout. They wouldn't be able to take any action because of the circumstances they were in. Then it would go to a more generalized depression. And in some cases, it even led beyond that to people, having suicidal thoughts and things like that. So it is a journey that can get progressively worse and progressively broader. It doesn't necessarily have to, though. Sometimes burnout can be short-lived. My own burnout took 6 years to recover from. So everybody's got their own journey to navigate their way out of burnout, and whether or not they can sidestep other kind of mental health issues. And there's a lot of overlap between burnout and depression. The key difference seems to be that burnout is usually something you can trace to something specific, whereas depression is a more generalized dissatisfaction and disconnection. So a lot of us may be saying that we're feeling depressed because of COVID. Some people would argue that that is in fact burnout because it is related to this weird time that we've been in. It's very specific. So if burnout can lead to depression, can my daughter get better? Absolutely. We can. So depression is an extension, in my understanding, depression is an extension of that burnout into the broader sort of feelings about life. And that absolutely can be reversed. That can be managed. That can be changed. So are people naturally born optimistic or pessimistic? There are some people who would argue, yes, that's a sort of genetic thing or a natural thing. I think there's also personally, I think there's a lot of nurture in it. My disinclination to be optimistic was a lot to do with my upbringing, I think. And then in my later life, I decided I'm going to learn to be hopeful. I'm going to look at things differently. And now generally I'm a fairly hopeful person by choice, by practice, by engaging that strength and saying, okay, I'd like it to look like this. And these are the steps I can take to make it look more like this, and not judge myself as a failure if I don't get it 100% the way I'm visualizing it. Laurie said roughly 50% from what I understand. I think we're starting to change our understanding. Even Martin Seligman, has said his original research, when he looked at learned optimism and learned pessimism, he said his research was backwards, and we're actually wired. We tend to be wired to the pessimistic side, and we need to work on making ourselves more optimistic. So 50% orientation from genetics. Yeah, I think it's just so hard to know how much is your environment, and how much is, we know there are some people who seem to face enormous adversity, and somehow or other they're always hopeful, and they always have a plan. And then there are other people who seem to feel set back by the smallest obstacle. But we also know there are people that have changed their perspective as well. Simplification has its limits, absolutely. And that that's what I was saying earlier about these linear models and things like that. They're nice starting points, but we all have our own journey. And if anyone wants to contact me afterwards to talk a little more about how to tackle burnout and stuff like that, well, I will share my contact details, but also Caroline, feel free to, share with people so that we can talk some more about it. Because I see there are people with questions that, it might make more sense to talk one-on-one. So now the third one in our happiness cadre is love. And research has shown that there are really 4 kinds of love. There's the romantic love. That's what people often think about, right? Is when we think about love, and this comes up a lot in the workplace, does love belong in the workplace? Well, maybe throwing your arms around someone and giving them a big kiss doesn't belong in the workplace, but other kinds of love, companionship, friendship, being supportive, showing humanity, being compassionate, they belong in the workplace just like anywhere else. And it was a big eye-opener to me that love is one of my lower strengths. It still is one of my lower strengths. But I feel these very intense moments of connection, like when we're doing this. You know, I am here in this room with all of you, and my sense of connection to you is very, very strong. I very much like Barbara Fredrickson's work, her Love 2.0 work about micro moments of connection. And I very often mention that, so I apologize if you've heard me talk about it before. But this idea that we connect with people in the briefest moments, it's a series of brief connections, not one long, intense, emotional connection to someone. Even romantic love is a series of short, intense connections, just more frequent than it would be if it's a friendship love or a kindness love. So love is another one that when we consciously express love, when we put feeling and thought into love, it raises our sense of well-being, our life satisfaction. So, and one of the greatest loves of my life has been my 3 dogs. So it doesn't have to be a person, it could be anything. So again, I'm going to give you a moment to pause and think about, where do you find the most satisfaction in expressing and experiencing love?
And we're going to get a chance to do this with Mega next week
right?
too. She's going to do Love 3.0.
Aren't dogs wonderful? I even went out and communed, because I don't have a dog at the moment, but I'm across from the dog park. And the other day I couldn't resist. I had to go and play with other people's dogs, because they're just, you know, they just are bundles of love. My animals, my family, my granddaughters, chickens, rabbits. I've got 2 rabbits. They are nuts, really. Friends and dancing buddies. And yeah, you mentioned that your cat died a year ago, and that makes me think of my 3 dogs. I don't have my dogs anymore. And isn't that such a weird thing, that it's like I smile about them and I'm sad that they're gone at the same time, that there's that juxtaposition, which brings us back to that notion of feeling conflicting emotions about the same thing. You know, I miss my dogs a lot. And at the same time, I laugh about the goofy things they did. You know, they still make me smile, and I haven't had a dog for 2 years. My top strength, I appreciate people in general and make friends very easily. Yeah, so a top strength can really help you to feel love, and it may be the strength of love, or it may be some other strength that you use as your means of connecting to people. And self-love, yes, showing ourselves, using our character strengths to care for ourselves, to do something for ourselves that, you know, is good for us in this moment. You know, maybe it is taking yourself out to do something. Yesterday or Sunday, I decided to do something I haven't done in a long time, which was order food for delivery. I decided I was going to be completely lazy, watch a video. I was going to have this food delivered. It didn't work out, and I ended up having to go and pick it up. So, you know, isn't that just the nature of life? But in that moment, that was a kind and loving thing for me to do for myself, that this one time I was just going to order in, and yes, it was going to be pizza. So, because it was the thing I needed in that moment. I hardly ever eat pizza. That day I was like, you know, a nice Italian thin crust pizza is just calling to me. So I want to do that. Here is another strength that is very strongly associated with happiness, and that life satisfaction, and can be one of the things that is really difficult during burnout. It is hard to be grateful for things when we're feeling burned out. But we know that when we practice gratitude, it does improve our emotions. It's not an instant fix, because what's happening is we're actually changing the wiring of the brain when we start to look at things in a grateful way. And you don't have to be sharing it with anyone. You don't have to tell anybody about your gratitude. It's for you to reflect upon. It's for you to experience that sense of, well, you know what, I have this, and I appreciate that. I am grateful for that. So again, small doses. We don't have to go crazy. If you're burned out, or someone you know is burned out, they don't have to be grateful for everything in the universe. We certainly don't want them going down the road of, well, I'm so much better off than other people. That's not what this is about. It's not shaming people into saying I shouldn't be burned out. It's about them recognizing that even in the most difficult moments, there's something for them to be grateful for. I was grateful this morning for the freshest tomatoes I've had in a long time. And I just marveled at them, you know, and they showed up at my door. I did a shopping order and it got delivered. And so someone else chose those out of all the tomatoes on display, brought these amazing, delicious. I'm so grateful that I can order my food, get it delivered. And then when it shows up, it's something I actually want to eat. It is not nasty or tasteless or any of those things. So again, taking a moment and thinking about something that is just that we can always be grateful for, that something small, something that we have. I'm always grateful. When I moved into this new house, we didn't have any hot water. I tell you, for 4 months, hot water was just the most magic thing to me. Every time I turned on the faucet after it had been fixed, or every time I turned on the shower and the water was actually hot, I was just like, I am so grateful for hot water. So again, it doesn't have to be anything momentous. Well, I mean, that is momentous if you're someone who doesn't have hot water, but you get what I'm saying. So let's take a pause and think about what's something that you can always be grateful for. And it may be your cat or your dog, or it may be something that you'd already used for one of the other things. Oh, I love that, Abby. You're watching the birds on video. Yeah. And if people are having it, so there is some research that shows that gratitude can cause us challenges. So for example, there was that fashion a little while ago for us all to think of 3 things we're grateful for every day. And what they discovered was that if you keep doing that, it actually starts to have the reverse effect, because you have this obligation to find something to be grateful for. So I think there's a lot to be said for gratitude and mindfulness together, because some days are just horrible. And that's okay too. We don't have to turn. Todd Kashdan does amazing work, I think, he's got that book that he did with Robert Biswell-Steiner about the upside of your dark side. You know, that there's this misconception that positive psychology is about turning things around to see the bright side, to see the silver lining. That isn't what we're trying to do. We're not trying to deny the yucky. We're just trying to remind ourselves that things live side by side. So it may be that at this moment in time, all of these things are really proving very difficult for us. And at the same time, I have the opportunity to watch 3 hawks outside my window soaring, not flapping their wings for 40 minutes at a time. They can just ride the air currents. And I can be grateful for that, even though everything else is, you know, about ready to drive me off a cliff. So it's a yes, and yes, this is horrible. And I'm glad I have this. You know, it's not to switch our focus to, you know what, I have so much to be grateful for. That's guilt inducing. That makes people feel, again, that shame. I feel crappy and I feel ashamed because my life is so much better than the person down the street, or that person who lives on the street, or whatever it is. Again, it's not about comparison. It's not about being grateful for being better off than other people. It's about being grateful for something that is meaningful to you in some small way, just to remind yourself that you still have that. And then finally, curiosity. Curiosity kills the cat. It can absolutely kill me, because anything, there's a shiny new thing and I can go off down that path looking at the shiny new thing. But at the same time, exploring new ideas. Several people said earlier that they feel zesty and enthusiastic when they're learning something new. Yeah, sometimes just letting ourselves go down that rabbit hole. That's curious. I want to know a bit more about that. Let me find out some more. That can be really beneficial, because it's allowing our minds to wander and grow and explore and experiment with something that is out of the ordinary. So curiosity, you know, finding those new ways of looking at things, learning something different and new, just a little bit. You know, love of learning is a much deeper thing. We end up sharing it with other people and stuff like that. Curiosity can just be, oh, that's interesting. Let me just find out a little bit more. And again, it can give you that zesty enthusiasm for something. Tea and the hot waters that goes in it. Laurie, you are my person, because I love tea. The sun coming up every day. Yeah. I can see the sun now. We've had a couple of days where there wasn't any sun and it's been distressing. So I'm always grateful for the strength of my body. Yeah. So I've started doing this body scan meditation where I actually feel, like feel my shoulders and feel my arms and things like that. And I found that really helps me to be grounded. But it also reminds me that even when it's creaky and achy, and the other day I broke my toe, my body is amazing. It gets me around. I was speaking to someone this morning who is in a wheelchair. She had a car accident 8 years ago and she's paraplegic. And she said that her wheelchair, the one particular wheelchair that she uses most of the time, is like an extension of her now. She can balance and move and twist and turn and do things in that wheelchair. And she realizes that her body and her brain have really assimilated that chair as the way that she gets around, the way, I might think about using my legs. And I found that fascinating because I've never really thought about it, that in the ways we adapt, there's a curiosity about, well, how can this work for me? How is this going to be different? How is this going to change my experience? Hints of spring in the air, even with snow on the ground. I love that one because I can count on myself showing up for myself. And when I fail, I must extend grace to myself, which makes it easier to extend to others. Yes, isn't that the truth? So, but hints of spring in the air. I love those too. There's those days where it's still cold, but the light is a bit different. It's more of a yellowy light and less of a white light. And whew, love that stuff. So we had our 5 happiness strengths. And remember, they're life satisfaction, well-being strengths. And we're looking for small incremental increases in them, not drastic changes. So we had zest, we had hope, we had curiosity, we had love, and we had gratitude. So which of those strengths do you find calling to you most as maybe being an antidote when you're feeling overwhelmed and tired and exhausted by life? Joanne, there isn't any particular order. These are the 5 that we find are most strongly correlated with people saying that they're feeling, that they have a high sense of well-being, and combinations of them as well. Also, using your signature strengths optimally can boost happiness as well. So this isn't the only path to happiness, but I like being able to focus on a specific group of strengths. And because we don't do that so much, we usually talk about people's signature strengths. This is hey, you could take these strengths and engage them and be deliberate about them. And the research shows that that will tend to increase your sense of well-being. Thinking of things for which you're grateful, always been curious, gratitude at first, and then maybe zest and love, curiosity. Yeah, so again, make a note for yourself. We've gone through and thought about small ways that we can use each of these strengths. And now make a note for yourself, which of those did you feel most drawn to? Which one resonated most with you? Because they are small incremental opportunities to reverse burnout and to reverse resentment and to reverse that sense that things are pointless. We'll skip that one and we'll skip that one because I've taken way too long. And this one, only 3 hours. All right, well, I thought we could do a quick meditation. You can actually do this by printing out a square. And what you do, 3 hours would be good. Thank you, Laurie. So what you do is, if you print out the square, you run your finger along the sides of the square as you do the 4 pieces of the meditation. So you run your finger along the first side and breathe into 4. And then you hold for 4, running your finger down the next side. And then you breathe out for 4, running your finger down the next side. And then hold for 4, coming up the 4th side back to where you started. So we'll do that. We'll do the actual meditation this time. So we're going to breathe in to a count of 4, 2, 3, 4. And now you're going to hold 2, 3, 4. And you're going to breathe out 2, 3, 4. And you're going to hold that with your breath out 2, 3, 4. So What emotions are you feeling now? Yeah, 4, Tony, that's great. 478 for sleep. I love that one. So here's my question to all of you who are still on the call. How many of you noticed a change in your emotion from the first time we checked in to the second time? Okay, great. So the reason I do this check-in is we didn't talk about fixing emotions. We were talking about burnout, which can be a little bit bleak, but we weren't talking about, hey, you noticed this emotion, what do you want to do about it? We didn't do anything about the emotions you observed at the beginning. We just focused on this topic for today, much lighter now. Thank you for that, Debbie. We just focused on this topic. We explored this topic. You thought about different ways that you can be zesty and hopeful and express love and experience love and so on. And your emotions changed. And it's a great reminder, I find, for people, is that emotions come and go. We don't have to get attached to them. We don't have to focus on them. We don't have to do anything about them. We just want to keep moving. We want to keep doing and being and experiencing and focusing on other things. And those emotions will pass us by like buses in the night or something like that, that we tend to get hooked up on an emotion. And especially when we start judging whether or not we should feel a certain way, you know, and then we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. They come and go all by themselves. And so we can just leave them and go about our business. So with that, I want to thank everybody for being here today. These are my contact details. So if anyone wants to follow up with anything, I can also put my Calendly link in. We can always do a quick call as well if you'd like to talk about any of these things. Burnout is rife at the moment. So if anyone feels that they want to, you know, check in and talk about what options there are for tackling these things in more depth or whatever, please let me know. And Caroline, I just want to thank you for inviting me back. And yeah, next week is Mega's session about Love 3.0. So that will be an interesting follow-up to this one.
And also we have Jordan coming back, Jordan Feingold, who's really talking about what we can do in the medical system to improve, you know, burnout and help our medical professionals. And have you met Jordan yet? Have you met her?
Jordan, I love Jordan. She and I were at a positive psychology conference with Lyle Baker, and she talked about the program that she put together, or she and some others put together to support students going through medical school. Yeah, that's what she's going to be telling us about. I'm so excited to hear her. And then I wanted to remind everybody, at the beginning of the call, Ruth and I were talking about this program that we have on eating and how eating changes how we feel. And we have the Esselstyns. It's a free conference every Wednesday, and they're coming to talk about, you know, how food, especially plant food, can influence us, and that nitrous oxide that I was talking about. And also, you know, Ruth, I don't know if you would like this, but it's pretty amazing. Amy Cami is a harpist, and she plays the harp while Whitney teaches yoga. Oh, that sounds lovely.
It's really, really cool. And then, of course, we have a bunch of cooking classes. And if anybody wants to, would anybody like a massage? You know, I would like a massage. I haven't had a massage in a long time. And we have Erica Clinton, who is the dean at the Swedish Institute. And she is going to be giving, for Valentine's Day, a course or a little thing on giving yourself, a friend, a massage, couples massage, the art of giving and getting great massages. So I don't know if anybody's curious or feeling zesty about or hopeful, or what's the other thing that we're doing? Zest with your gratitude for all that.
But hope, love, gratitude, curiosity.
I'm feeling all of those things. Can you feel them simultaneously?
Absolutely. You can feel all 24 together. They cluster. We have strengths clusters. And one thing I did want to mention is that I have just launched with a whole bunch of 45 other people, a VIA Character Strengths community of practice. It is not sponsored by VIA Institute on Character, but they know I'm doing it and they're fully supportive of me doing it. We launched in January, and actually I'll just put the link in the thing again.
Oh, please. Yeah.
Yeah, we launched in January, and what we do is we meet on a Wednesday. It's the third Wednesday at 8 a.m. and the third Thursday at 6 p.m. People can choose which session they come to, or they can come to both. And we're exploring the application of character strengths in different areas. So last time it was stress management. Next time it's organization. In March, Marjorie Onos and I are going to be talking about what it's like to have self-regulation as a high strength and what it's like not to. And so
that's a good one, because isn't self-regulation around the world like the lowest strength of humans?
Yes. And Marjorie has it really high and can't imagine being without it. And I'm like, ooh, I can't imagine what that would be like. So we're going to start a discussion about what it's like to be high and low in different strengths and what it feels like. So
I love it.